The slap echoed through the diner so sharply that even the sizzling grill seemed to pause, as if the walls themselves were stunned. For half a second, time froze. Coffee cups hovered midair. Forks stopped halfway to mouths, and every breath in Blue Harbor Diner caught in collective disbelief. I share new stories here every day, and I would really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you love it if you keep listening till the end. Mara hadn't seen it coming. One moment she was standing with her notepad clutched to her chest, apologizing for a mistake that barely qualified as one. And the next, her head snapped sideways as pain exploded across her cheek. The taste of copper filled her mouth. She staggered, but didn't fall. Falling meant dropping the tray. Falling meant drawing more attention. And attention, in her world, always came with consequences. Write in the comments and tell me which part of the world you're watching this story from. I'm really interested to see how far this story has traveled. She forced herself to stay upright, her fingers trembling as she steadied the plate. Around her, the diner remained silent. Not because people didn't care, because they were afraid. Blue Harbor was the kind of place where everyone knew who held the power. And the woman standing in front of Mara held plenty of it. Lexa Haro lowered her manicured hands slowly, lips curling in disgust. "You had one job," she said coldly. "One?" Mara swallowed hard, nodding as if she deserved it. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'll fix it right away. It had only been a missing lemon wedge. One small detail on an iced tea." But Lexa Haro wasn't the kind of woman who tolerated small mistakes, especially from people she considered beneath her. Her designer sunglasses were still perched on her head, her expensive coat draped over the booth like a throne's banner. Beside her stood Brent Wallace, broad-shouldered, smug, and watching the entire scene with a faint, amused smile. Mara turned away before the tears could fall. She couldn't afford to cry. Not today. Not ever. Behind the counter, tucked carefully out of sight, a small basket rustled. A faint whimper slipped out, weak, fragile, and filled with pain. Mara's heart clenched. "Scout," she rushed back, kneeling beside the basket, forgetting the world for a moment. The tiny German Shepherd puppy lay curled in a blanket, his body trembling, his eyes glassy with fever. He was only 10 weeks old, far too young to be fighting an infection that refused to break. The vet bills were already overdue. So was the rent. That was why she was working a double shift. That was why she had begged her manager to let her keep Scout nearby, where she could watch him between tables. "It's okay," she whispered, gently placing her hands around his small body. "I've got you. I'm right here." Scout let out another soft cry, barely strong enough to lift his head. That's when Brent noticed. "What's that?" he said loudly, his voice cutting through the silence. He stepped closer, peering over the counter. "You've got a mutt in here?" Mara stiffened, instinctively shielding the basket with her body. "He's sick," she said quietly. "I just need to keep an eye on him, please." Brent snorted. "Figures. People like you shouldn't own dogs." His eyes flicked over her uniform, her worn shoes, the faint bruise already forming on her cheek. "Can't even afford your own life." Lexa laughed softly, the sound sharp and cruel. "Disgusting." Scout whimpered again, weaker this time. Something inside Brent shifted. Annoyance twisted into irritation, then into something darker. "Shut that thing up," he snapped. Mara didn't answer. She just curled further around the basket, her arms forming a shield, her body instinctively choosing the puppy over herself. The kick came without warning. A brutal force slammed into her side, knocking the air from her lungs. Pain ripped through her ribs as she collapsed fully to the floor, instinctively turning so her shoulder took the worst of it. She wrapped herself tighter around Scout, refusing to let him be touched. The diner erupted not in sound, but in shock. A spatula clattered to the floor in the kitchen. Someone gasped. A mother pulled her child close and covered their eyes. No one moved. No one spoke. Lexa smirked. Mara lay curled on the cold tile, gasping for breath, her body screaming in protest. But her hands never left Scout. He was still alive, still breathing. That was all that mattered. What Brent didn't realize, what none of them noticed in that moment, was the man sitting quietly at the counter right behind him. A man who had gone perfectly still. A man with cropped hair, a square jaw, and eyes that had seen far worse than diner violence. Jack Ryland had been stirring his coffee when the slap happened. By the time the kick landed, he was already standing, and the city was about to change forever. Jack Ryland didn't raise his voice. He didn't rush forward in a burst of anger either. Instead, he stood with a calm so unnerving that the air around him seemed to tighten. The kind of calm that came from years of training, years of choosing control over chaos, and years of knowing exactly how much damage a single moment could cause. Brent turned just in time to see him. "What are you staring at?" Brent scoffed, rolling his shoulders like a man who had never once been told no. "Sit down and mind your business." Jack stepped forward, placing himself squarely between Brent and the woman curled on the floor. Between cruelty and its victim. His presence alone forced Brent to take half a step back, though he didn't even realize he'd done it. "Apologize," Jack said. The word wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was precise, like a command already expecting compliance. Brent laughed. "You kidding me?" He glanced around the diner, fishing for approval, but found only averted eyes and stiff bodies. "Do you know who my father is?" Jack didn't blink. "Don't care." That answer hit harder than any insult. Lexa crossed her arms, irritation flashing across her flawless face. "This doesn't concern you," she snapped. "You're overstepping." Jack shifted slightly, widening his stance, ensuring that if Brent moved again, he'd have to go through him first. "The second someone hurts a woman protecting her dog," he said evenly, "it concerns me." Mara tried to sit up. Pain shot through her ribs, stealing her breath. She winced, but refused to cry out. Scout stirred weakly in her arms, licking her chin as if to remind her he was still there. Brent's jaw tightened. He reached out and shoved Jack's chest. It was the worst decision he would ever make. Jack caught Brent's wrist mid-air. There was no struggle, no hesitation. His grip locked, twisted, and dropped Brent to his knees in one smooth motion. The sound of bone grinding against bone filled the diner, followed by Brent's scream. The room gasped as one. Brent knelt there, stunned, his arrogance evaporating into panic. Jack leaned down, his voice low enough that only Brent could hear it. "You kick her again," Jack said, "and I'll personally make sure the only place you're walking into for the next 10 years is a prison yard." Jack released him. Brent collapsed onto the floor, clutching his wrist, his face pale and damp with sweat. Lexa stumbled backward, suddenly unsure. You assaulted him," she stammered. "We'll call the police." Jack finally looked at her. His eyes were cold, assessing. "Go ahead." He turned to Mara and extended a hand. "Easy," he said gently. She hesitated, then took it. The moment she stood, her legs trembled. Jack steadied her without comment, his touch firm but careful. Scout whimpered again, and Jack's expression softened instantly. He knelt, checking the puppy with surprising tenderness. "He's burning up," Jack said. "How long's he been like this?" "Since last night," Mara whispered, tears finally slipping free. "I don't have the money for another visit." "You do now," Jack replied simply. "He needs a vet, immediately." As they turned toward the door, Lexa found her voice again. "You can't just walk out," she said sharply. We'll say you attacked us." Jack stopped. Slowly, he turned back, holding up his phone. Already recorded. Every word. Every hit. Every kick. The color drained from Lex's face. "And one more thing," Jack added calmly. "The police chief you're about to call. He's under federal investigation." The diner erupted in whispers. Jack's gaze never left Brent or Lexa, and I'm the one helping lead it. For the first time, fear replaced entitlement. Outside, the cold air hit Mara like a shock. Jack guided her to his truck, carefully buckling Scout into her arms. He drove fast but steady, breaking traffic laws only where it mattered. At the emergency clinic, Jack handled everything paperwork. Payment, questions while Mara sat clutching Scout, praying silently. The diagnosis came quickly. A severe infection. Another day, maybe two, and Scout wouldn't have made it. "He'll pull through," the vet said. "You brought him just in time." Mara broke down then, sobbing into Jack's jacket. He didn't push her away. He didn't rush her. He simply stayed. Hours later, as Scout slept hooked to an IV. "My knee me. Where are knee my me/F? Ruby kiss. Ruby kiss, Ruby kiss, only Ruby kiss." Jack's phone buzzed non-stop. Messages, calls, names Mara didn't recognize. When she asked, he hesitated. People who thought they were untouchable, he finally said. They just found out they're not. Back at the diner, police cars flooded the parking lot. But this time, they weren't there to protect power. They were there to dismantle it. And this was only the beginning. By morning, the city was buzzing. News traveled fast in places like Blue Harbor, but this story moved faster than most. Someone had leaked the diner footage. The slap, the kick, the scream, and then the moment everything changed, the calm man stepping forward and dropping a powerful name to its knees without ever raising his voice. By sunrise, Brent Wallace's face was everywhere. Mara sat beside Scout's kennel in the veterinary clinic, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. The pup slept peacefully now, his tiny chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Antibiotics dripped slowly into his vein, and for the first time in days, his fever had broken. Jack stood near the window, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes," he said quietly. "We have it all. Video, audio, witnesses." A pause. "No, I don't care who his father is." He ended the call and turned back to Mara. "They're issuing warrants," he said. "Both of them." Mara blinked. For what they did to me." "For that?" Jack nodded, "and a lot more." "Okay?" She struggled to process it. People like Lexa and Brent didn't face consequences. Not here, not ever. Their families owned half the city businesses, judges, officers. Mara had grown up learning to keep her head down, to survive quietly. Jack seemed to read her thoughts. "I spent 20 years believing silence kept people safe," he said. "It doesn't. It just keeps the wrong people comfortable." Within hours, squad cars pulled up outside Brent Wallace's gated home. This time, no friendly officers waved them away. Federal badges flashed. Doors were opened. Phones were seized. And when Brent was escorted out in handcuffs, cameras caught every second. Lexa Harrow was arrested downtown, still wearing last night's designer coat. She screamed at the officers, demanded calls, threatened lawsuits. None of it mattered. Their mugshots hit the internet before sunset at the diner. Staff gathered around a phone behind the counter, watching in disbelief as the names that once terrified them became headlines of disgrace. Cooks who had never spoken up before started sharing stories. So did waitresses. So did shop owners. One voice led to another, and then another. Investigations reopened. Bribes uncovered. Evidence surfaced that had been buried for years. Officers were suspended. Judges recused themselves. The city began to crack open, exposing rot beneath polished surfaces. Jack spent his days in meetings with federal agents, and his nights at the clinic with Mara. He brought her coffee. He brought Scout a tiny stuffed toy. He never acted like a hero. He never talked about his time as a Navy SEAL unless directly asked, and even then. Only briefly. "You didn't have to do all this," Mara said one night. Watching Scout wobble clumsily on his healing legs, Jack smiled faintly. "Yes, I did." A week later, Scout came home, healthy. Stronger, still small, but full of life. The first thing he did was trip over his own paws trying to reach Jack, tail wagging so hard his whole body swayed. Mara laughed, a sound that surprised her as much as anyone. Life didn't magically become easy. Her ribs took weeks to heal. Money was still tight, but something had shifted. Customers at the diner tipped more. Some left notes. One even slipped an envelope under her coffee queue print money. No name attached. Jack helped her file a restraining order. Then a civil suit. Then another case she didn't even know she was entitled to. Each step forward felt unreal, like walking in a city she'd never been allowed to enter before. One afternoon, as Scout chased pigeons outside the diner, Mara finally asked the question that had been sitting in her chest for weeks. "Why were you really there that night?" she asked Jack. He watched the street for a moment. "I go where people forget they're human," he said. "That diner just happened to remind me why I started." She nodded, understanding more than the words. Across town, empires fell quietly. Accounts were frozen. Deals collapsed. Friends disappeared. The city that once bowed to money and intimidation was learning a new language. Accountability, and at the center of it all wasn't a politician or a billionaire. It was a waitress, a retired SEAL, and a German shepherd. Pup who refused to give up. The storm was passing. What remained was something no one could buy. Hope. The city didn't change overnight, but it changed. Enough. Weeks passed, and Blue Harbor began to feel lighter, as if the weight that had pressed down on everyone's shoulders for years had finally lifted. The same booths, the same chipped mugs, the same bell over the door, but the silence was gone. People spoke louder now, laughed more freely. Even the walls seemed to breathe easier. Scout grew fast, his legs strengthened, his coat thickened, and his once weak whimpers turned into confident barks that echoed through the diner every time Jack walked in. Customers had started asking about him by name. Some brought treats. Others brought toys. He became part of the place, a living reminder that something fragile could survive, even thrive. If someone was brave enough to stand up for it, Mara watched it all with quiet amazement. She was still the same woman, still working shifts, still counting tips, but she stood straighter now. The bruise on her cheek had faded. So had the fear that used to follow her like a shadow. When difficult customers raised their voices, managers stepped in. When someone crossed a line, other patrons spoke up. Power had shifted. Not to one person, but too many. Jack kept his promise. He testified. He turned over evidence. He stayed long enough to see the cases through, even when the pressure mounted and old enemies tried to resurface. The trials were slow, but they were thorough. Names that once ruled the city were spoken now in courtrooms, stripped of prestige and protection. Brent Wallace took a plea deal. Lexa Harrow didn't. The verdicts made headlines across the state, and then, just like that, Jack's job was done. On a quiet morning, he sat at the counter, Scout at his feet, sipping the same black coffee he always ordered. Mara brought it over without asking. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. "You leaving?" she asked softly. "Soon," Jack admitted. "There are other cities that need cleaning." Scout lifted his head, ears perking, as if he understood every word. Mara smiled, though her chest tightened. "Then, before you go," she said, reaching behind the counter. She pulled out a small envelope. "I wanted you to have this." Inside was a photo. Mara and Scout outside the diner. And on the back, written in careful handwriting, "You reminded us who we are." Jack swallowed. "Thank you." He stood, crouching to Scout's level. The pup pressed his head into Jack's chest, tail wagging wildly. Jack laughed a real laugh, rare and unguarded. "You take care of her," Jack whispered to him. Scout barked once, sharp and certain. When Jack finally walked out, the bell jingled softly. No applause. No speeches. Just quiet respect. Life went on. Mara saved enough to move into a better apartment. She enrolled in night classes. Scout grew into a powerful, loyal dog who slept by her door every night. And sometimes, when the diner was slow and the sun dipped low, she'd look at the empty stool at the counter and smile, because she knew, in a city once ruled by money and fear, something unbreakable had been born. Not revenge, not violence, but courage, true justice, real humanity, and a beginning none of them ever saw coming. If this story touched your heart, let us know with a like, comment yes, and subscribe for more stories like this. Thanks for watching till the end. Don't forget to subscribe my channel. ****.